because people can sort of read between the lines of like, oh, you really do genuinely care about me. And that people won't ever really forget the way that you made them feel. And so that is something that you can always sort of draw back on time and time again.
Hey there, and welcome to the Event Crushed podcast. Each week, we'll be chatting about all things wedding industry, entrepreneurship, and how to crush it in life and business. I'm so glad you're here. Now, let's dive into this week's episode. Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Event Crushed podcast. This is your host, Becky, and whether this is your first time tuning in or if you've been listening for all 68 episodes so far, I am just so glad that you're here today. We had such an awesome conversation on this week's episode of the podcast, and I'm really excited to introduce you to our guest this week. So let's jump right in with her introduction. Samantha brings over 14 years of expertise to the event industry as principal planner and designer at House of Joy, founder of Kinetic Experiences, and creative director at House of Samantha. Originating from corporate events in Chicago, she now crafts transformative experiences nationwide. Recognized as the Knot's one to watch and featured in publications like Martha Stewart and Brides, Samantha is known for a connective approach deeply inspired by personal stories. Her work empowers clients to explore their values and cultivate moments that truly reflect their identity through designs featuring vibrant color and pattern to push beyond the expected and into the meaningful. She extends her expertise through Kinetic Experiences, a boutique industry conference designed to ignite passion, cultivate aligned connections, and empower business owners to forge their own paths through experiential learning and diverse leadership voices. Me and Samantha got into some really fun topics, including using our client stories in their design process and the power of asking why and the power of curiosity in both our client relationships and our vendor relationships, and just the importance of listening and how our ability to listen can really impact our relationships with our vendors and clients alike. I know that you're going to love this conversation. So with that, let's get right into it. Hello, Samantha. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm really looking forward to getting to know you more.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. This will be fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. You had sent over some possible topics to discuss, and I loved them because there are things that I haven't really gotten into much on the podcast yet. And I always love it when, new ideas come about. And I feel like you have a really interesting approach. And I think that we're going to get a lot of good stuff out of this conversation. And so kind of the two ideas that you had presented was the idea of how we can understand our client story in order to release our creativity and working together with them in design of weddings and events. And then the other one was about listening and how I think the phrase you had used was how listening can transform fleeting interactions into lasting partnerships, which I'm all about that. So I'm really excited to get into both of these things and kind of combining them into one episode, but I think they tie together really well.
Yeah. Kind of the same thing in different recipients of the energy.
Exactly. Yes. So before we dive into all of that, could you just give my listeners a bit of a background on you? I know you have like 3 separate brands that you run, and I would just love to hear about it all and how you got to where you are today.
All the things. Well, I'm not known to be lazy or to have someone who has lots of free time. So I keep myself busy, that's for sure. So I'm Samantha Leenheer. I'm the creative director and principal planner of House of Joy. It's a planning and design firm. I'm originally from Chicago, and I love to always just kind of joke and say that I'm a constant student of life. I think getting out, being active is the best way to sort of learn about yourself and learn about those around you. I am a self-described colorful sensory designer. So for our planning and design clients, we like to think of through the colors, through the senses, how those sort of co-inform each other, and really looking at how our senses can sort of transport people's memories and bring them back into their sort of, the parts of their life that we're truly most inspired by it, which is their memories and their stories of their family. I'm also the founder of Kinetic Experiences, and then I do a lot of my personal speaking and coaching and stuff underneath the brand of House of Samantha, which I teach like styling, and I do creative direction services as well for creative brands.
Amazing. And Kinetic can you just share a little bit about that? Is it like a retreat, a networking experience? Like, what is it exactly?
The answer is kind of D, all of the above. I've sort of refined the language to call it a boutique gathering for wedding and event professionals. It's truly an intimate environment for people to come through and everything we do is sort of through the lens of connection and experience. So how can we make something more connective to who we are as people, really meeting our attendees at like the intersection of sort of the personal and the professional, because there's so much more as creatives that we bring from our personal life, that we bring from our own personalities, our own lived experiences that informs a lot of what our business does on the personal side, right? And how we structure our business hours and a lot of what we do from there. So you could call it a retreat. You could call it very generically a conference. It does have education. It does have meals. It does have connections. We call them connection sessions, ways that we sort of all get involved, but it's a little bit more through a lens of experience, pushing and evolving, and sort of a new way to network within the industry. So we hold a couple different events throughout the year in different locations throughout the entire country. So all throughout, something new.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. Is there one like coming up in the future?
We have one coming out in April 2026. It's at St. Michael's at the Inn at Perry Cabin is our partner and host location as well. So it's a really, just a great way to be in a room with so many different people that you can build sort of like-minded partners with, that you can pull in, people of your equal, pull people above you, bring people in, sort of nominate. It's just a really a different space. And every event we do is a little bit different. I like to kind of take the core pieces, right? Like if you think like a bedroom, and then I like to rearrange them every time and do something different or flip in a new idea or things like that. And one of the things that people love the most that we do is our connection sessions, which are sort of a adult icebreaker, really a really intentional, really approachable way for people to kind of just be seen and show up and really feel like a sense of belonging within the room, and that like all different types, all different perspectives are really sort of welcomed. And we reflect that too with our speakers that we bring in who actually attend the entire event. So they're at the table and at the meals and everything alongside you and attending everything alongside you as well too. So it's a really fun way to sort of feel connected, fill your cup. And in the world we're in now, right now, we're so sort of simultaneously overly connected and also like the loneliest we've ever been. And this is sort of going back to our roots of connectiveness and sort of filling those cups in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that sounds incredible. And I will be sure to include any links or information on that in the show notes. So if anyone wants to come check it out in 2026, it sounds absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's fun. It's something different.
Yeah, for sure. So House of Joy, was that your first brand of the three?
Yes. So I originally started my first business, actually was formerly known as Samantha Joy Events, where I live. A lot of people started calling me Samantha Joy. My name is not Samantha Joy. Joy is my middle name. It's a family middle name. My birthday is December 20th. And so I was like, how do I keep the joy, which is what I want, and the way that people really feel from us and our team, and sort of evolve it. And it sort of evolved, and we changed the name a couple of years ago into House of Joy. And so that's our planning and design firm where we do corporate, social, and weddings.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I love the name. Super fun.
Thanks.
So you mentioned, or you alluded to kind of what your design style is like, but how, I would love to hear a bit more about your approach to design and how storytelling fits into your design process.
Yeah. So I think for me specifically, I'm like the most singularly inspired by people's stories. If I could talk to people all day long, learn about their stories, ask questions like, why are you doing that? Or what drew you to this decision? Or, what drew you to your undergrad? Or why did you decide to go to the bars when you never go to the bars, right? And really uncovering the different parts about the stories of our couples, both as individuals as well as with families, really informs a lot of how I shape gatherings that feel reflective of who they are. I want to be able to listen intently and sort of understand the way in which like they naturally gather and bring that back to them. And then I like to take a lot of nuances to their personal story, right? Like did he give you a watch for your first Christmas? Like, can we tie something back? Do you have, we have a client this year whose dog is named Bic after like the pen company. So it's just kind of a fun little like play on like dogs and pens, and nothing that has to be like overly kitschy, but it's truthfully moving with intention through the way that we're designing and stuff that feels reflective of their story as individuals and together as a couple, as well as like their family stories and how their family sort of celebrates. And really what we can uncover, kind of like an archaeologist, is we're sort of uncovering what those threads are that are coming up. And we're also sort of testing what they feel the most aligned with and what they feel strongest to, right? Like what are sort of common threads that are things that they feel are really, really important to them versus what are things that sort of were almost like given to them by family or more like happenstance. Like if you didn't choose your undergrad or you didn't choose your high school and you met as high school sweethearts, like maybe your school's not that important, but the fact that you met in high school is still significant. So being able to pull out those pieces allow us to really create and shape an event that's really reflective of like them and how they gather, how they want to gather with people and how they want to celebrate.
Yeah, I love that. How do you go about getting those stories out of them? Is it just like meetings with them, talking in person? Do you have them fill out questionnaires? I'm just curious, like, what's your process of gathering those stories?
A couple different things. There are some that we do via a questionnaire. The questionnaires, I think, start to get them really, really ready for all of our different like calls together. And I really do it through a series of simultaneous links. So the first and the easiest is questionnaires. And usually we do those as a lot of sort of like the everyday question, the things that you're going to ask, your engagement story and things like that. I always kind of consider that like the first tier of questioning. And then what we do is we do sort of what we call monthly calls with all of our clients. And each of those, I sort of strategically have questions that I'm digging into about each thing. So let's talk about catering and how are we doing this? It's a lot about being curious. I'm generally a very curious person. So like, why did you make that decision? Or why do you feel like you want to go to this versus that? And what you start to uncover a lot is people's decision making and their values and where they want to sort of put their energy to, right? Crafting a menu for them might be as simple as this is just what we've always had for our families' gatherings for, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, Hanukkah, whatever it is that they feel reflective of. And there's others who like their family never really cared very much about food. So they don't feel as comfortable caring about. And what you can uncover is that maybe they do feel more strongly about food than they did before, or maybe they don't. So for me, it's really about being just a generally curious person about other people and my clients. And, I grew up loving shows like Mythbuster and like the YouTube called Smart Every Day and like how things are working and how people are moving. So really understanding per people is sort of what influences me to sort of uncover their story in order to be able to like share it and reflect it back to them and sort of design a space in which they feel like they've walked into something that totally reflects who they are and their values back to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea of just being curious and just kind of like digging deeper. I feel like if we there's so much that could be left on the table if we didn't kind of like get to that next layer. Cause I feel like so much of it can really just be kind of surface level. But obviously that's not going to lead to a great personalized wedding design. And so the deeper that we can go, the more we learn about them and the more the event will reflect them. So,
yeah. And so many times that you've run into a situation where you ask like, oh, why did you make that decision? Or how did you get to that budget? And it's often only based upon the information, And as a planner designer with over 10 years of experience, like I'm supposed to be coming in as that expert and providing and sort of pushing against that thought being like, well, there's a new way we're doing this. There's a new way we're seeing that this is feeling in alignment, or sometimes even giving them permission, being like, I understand that your mom wants this traditional plated meal, but if you want tacos and you want, trying to think of something else, you want a curry buffet, like let's do it. That feels reflective of like your favorite foods or where you guys first met, or maybe you guys always went out to the bars and got, tacos and burritos after you hung out, or maybe you didn't. Maybe you are like such popcorn fiends, like giving them the permission that like it's okay, that the thing that sometimes I call them like our isms, like my Samantha isms, Becky isms, like whatever your isms. Sometimes we can feel like those are so nerdy and geeky, but to the other people, like those are things that are significant about us and what they love and celebrate and almost what they're attracted to about you. And so playing on those and highlighting those can make an environment in which so many people who have loved you from various parts of your life feel even more comfortable celebrating with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. It made me think of when you were talking about like the couple coming in and they always have preconceived notions or things
Yeah.
that they think they're supposed to do. And it's really nice when you can be like, actually, like you don't have to do that at all. Like you can, there's no
Yeah.
reason. Like I just recently had a couple where the groom was really concerned because he had like less groomsmen than the bride had bridesmaids. And he was like, it's supposed to match. And I was like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Like it
According
doesn't
to
matter
who?
at all if it matches. And so it was cool to just see the sigh of relief when he like realized like, oh, it doesn't? Like I can have
Yeah.
a different number?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. My favorite is when people are like, oh, it's just wedding food. And I'm like, oh yeah. And when was the last time you paid the largest food bill of your life? And it was just food. I'm just thinking like, if that's how you normally do food, then like we probably aren't the best fit. But I'm like, I feel like food should be reflective. And if it's just going to be wedding food, then let's have it at least be wedding food that tells something more than just chicken, right? Like have a greater meaning.
For sure. Okay. So for anyone who is listening and I don't know, like every client is very different, obviously. And a lot of designers might have kind of like their distinct style of design that like when people look at photos are like, oh, that's a House of Joy wedding. Like, they can
Yeah.
just see your style. How do you kind of keep your style present while still working with a couple to make to make their story shine, essentially?
Yeah, yeah. This is a great question because I think for me within the world of design, I think there's a spectrum that you can find designers on. And I think designers can run the gamut of I'm the designer, you came for me for my creative, like almost like you're commissioning an artist and you came to me for my art. I need, 3 or 4 pieces of information and then like I'm gonna design for you and you accept it. Like it's a very super cohesive, very recognizable aesthetic, often from the public or from a distance. And then I think there's other designers and sort of fading through the spectrum of ones who sort of take your information and your story and sort of push it out and design it through their lens. And I'm more of the latter. It took me a long time to understand and to see the sort of repeating threads of what my design is and how people could see it. People would always be like, I love your designs. And I was like, can you tell me what are you seeing? Because like I'm too close to it in a way. And I basically had to establish a set of creative boundaries. And so it's like, okay, how is from a planning and design perspective, especially as a creative, is from the design side, like what am I happily to like go toe to toe with a client on or really sort of defend or anything like that, where it's like, this is something that is like quintessential to how we design. This is like what sets our stuff apart, but also from the planning side, like logistically, what is something that I'm willing to, explain to you or willing to lose a client over? I think a really great one from the logistics side is like tent walls. Like they are in our contract. They are not an option. I don't care if the weather looks like it's going to be wonderful for the next week. Like we always have tent walls on hand because I'm not willing to put my name and my team in a place where we don't have tent walls and everything that can sort of unfold behind it. And I think the same can be said for any creative really in terms of like, what are you willing to do? If you're an artist who only does large format and someone says, come and do small, like, are you still protecting your art and your craft and your signature by doing it in a smaller format? Or is that only ever best delivered in that larger format? And so I think it's sort of a question of understanding where you are as a creative and how your art is best produced sort of on the creative design spectrum, right? Are you like, you're coming to me, this is my art, and I need to feel like you're commissioning me? Or are you better and more adaptable to different scenarios where you can sort of take people back and feel more reflective of their stories? And there's, varying degrees of that, along with what are my boundaries and what are, in a way, like the non-negotiables, like what am I unwilling to do if you always have consults in your location because it serves you best in your process and someone wants you to come to them, like, can you still maintain, the essence of what that is by changing? Or is that sort of like a non-negotiable, right? Like, I don't do calls with clients after 6:00. I just can't. I have 2 small kids. It's not something that is, behoovement. I don't do evening calls either because at that point, my creative energy is just gone. And I don't feel like I'm giving you the time and investment that you deserve in my attention to you either. So I think sort of protecting those pieces of you. And I would say like the third part I would probably say is like protecting your creative energy and finding places that truly like inspire you and refuel that creative side of you. I always joke I'm a little bit of an input person. So the more you tell me about your story, the more that I can creatively output in terms of ideas and formulate and collaborative senses.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea of thinking of it, like you mentioned, as kind of a spectrum, and all designers are different and fall in a different place in there, but just kind of visualizing it that way is really helpful. And just, yeah, the idea of boundaries too. Like you mentioned the tent walls, like that's a clear boundary.
Sometimes it literally is a clear boundary.
I know. I'm like, it's an actual wall.
Sometimes they are clear.
That's great. I wanted to see if you had any specific examples that you could share about like something unique in a couple's story that you were able to use in their design. I would love to hear anything that you're willing to share.
One that comes to mind, actually, a couple of years ago, we had a groom who had, I can't remember the type of the vehicle, but he was restoring this old car. It, looks like a really cool vintage looking Jeep, but it's not a Jeep. So pardon that I don't remember the name of the car. But we sort of, at that point in time, and I still do it for clients who wanted, is we sort of creatively design and concept out a really interesting engagement session rather than just like any old park. We really get the hands in it to tell part of their story. And so we created this engagement session alongside their photographer where we could bring in their dogs, and they were very like homebody people. Like, so we sort of had them cooking in the kitchen, and then they went out by the fire, and then like we had them just sort of, they go out hunting, and sort of that like rough and tumble side of them where like they literally drove their car out to the front lawn, like closer to the woods. And we created like a little concept there, kicked off their shoes. They both like threw on some jeans. And that was just such a special part for them to feel really like reflective of like his favorite things, especially from like a male client side, wanting to really feel like they're part of the process where they don't feel like they often get a voice. And so that was really, really fun to sort of be able to kind of concept something. And then, it was a male and a female client. And so the female client, the bride, was really loving that like there was a piece of him finally in part of the story, and that like he felt like he was part of it, not just like, doing what she wanted just to like make things easier or simpler. So he loved it because he just lit up at that point. So it was really, really fun to tell part of that. And then we drew strings and pulled on little threads of him hunting and his dogs and things like that, and sort of played with the juxtaposition of like more female and more masculine elements during their wedding design. And she loved it. Again, the bride loved it so almost even more than he did, because she was like, yes, this is totally you. Like, I feel like this table is the union of our two families. This is like the blending of the two of us. And like, we had like a little bit of leather for him. And then we had some dainty china for her. And it was just like this perfect blend where they sort of each felt like they were seen and represented, and felt that like through their family and their family stories too.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. That's really special.
Yeah. Just a fun little moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We are going to, again, it totally ties in, but we're going to transition over to kind of the listening side of things now. So what does that look like for you? Like, obviously we all should listen. But how, like, what is your approach to listening, and how does that affect your client relationships and your vendor relationships? And I'm just kind of curious what that looks like for you.
Yeah. So I think it's taking sort of what I said earlier about being really curious and just doing it through sort of the act of active listening. And when you're really, really active, you're asking a lot of clarifying questions. You're asking a lot of why questions. You're like getting curious about people's process. Why do you do it this way? It's always a great one to get curious about like people's pricing structures. Do you have a design fee? No design fee. Do you have a minimum? Why don't you have a minimum? Do you want to stay local? Do you want to do destination? It's always sort of fun to sort of uncover a little bit about people's, what they value, what their goals are, what resonates with them. I've had so many different relationships grow because I could really like listen and read between the lines of like what they were ultimately saying, right? Were they maybe unhappy in that location, or they felt like they could grow bigger than that, or they just were stagnant and couldn't find a local partner. And I shared somebody on a national level that could work with them. And they just didn't know how to do it. Or, I love making friends with other planners. And so it's just understanding different pricing structures for different locations and things like that, that when you can really sort of uncover things about them, you can really start to serve. And I think a lot of that comes from being more service minded, right? I talk a lot about giving first rather than taking. I think when you lead and really find that you're part of the hospitality and service industry, you lead with a service-minded heart. And with that, you're sort of always thinking of how can others be served? How can I support you? Like, how can I spread your message, your energy? Because people can sort of read between the lines of like, oh, you really do genuinely care about me. And that people won't ever really forget the way that you made them feel. And so that is something that you can always sort of draw back on time and time again and reflect on. So I really think it's like being curious, but doing it with your colleagues and your vendors through like an active listening sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said about like, obviously our industry, we are a, service-based industry, but it is surprising. Well, it is surprising the amount of people that you come across that really seem like they're more in it for themselves and not as much about serving the client or the vendor partners. And
and the transparency around it, right? Like just being like, hey, everyone is, I want the business over my competitor, totally. But I also would rather have more of my aligned business and have my competitor have more of their aligned business than we both have half a calendar that doesn't fit. Or, if your objective is to be a national speaker, like just having the clarity and the understanding to ask those questions to find that out, because then you can support them in that way and you can showcase them in that way. And I think not being sort of collaborative and having the clarification around like what you're truly getting at and what your next like movement or phase of your business is can sort of muddy the waters and sometimes muddy, especially in our industry, muddy friendships that have, relationships that have become friendships.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk a little bit about the question why, because I think you mentioned in that original questionnaire how you kind of use why to uncover potential roadblocks or fears. And I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah. I think why alone can really confuse people. Like you're not really like guiding them through. But I think when you get into a really great conversation, you can understand sort of people's motives. I always sort of go back to like motives, morals, goals, ethos, like core values and things like that. And that really, I think, helps you sort of unpigeonhole people from like, oh, you're just a caterer, so you must only function this way. Well, anyone who works in sales and catering has really great skills and could do something really wonderful and probably can move to a different area of the industry or even just a totally different industry as a whole. And so I think when you ask clarifying questions around why, saying like, oh, Becky, you have a podcast. Why did you start your podcast? Why did you choose the podcast format? Why did you choose this individual format? Like, why aren't you the only one talking? Why did you decide to add on, people to interview or people to have a conversation with? Like, why are you on a podcast format versus a YouTube format? Like, what is your preferred methodology? Why, where did you go and the motions that you take, right? I think you uncover a lot more of, and sometimes it's even interesting because you uncover it, but also you help the other person uncover it because they've thought about it, but never truly thought about it. And those are my favorite moments is when they get the little like, aha, because you're like, oh, why is it why I, as a planner, I love it when people tell me I can only do the room in one way. And I'm like, oh, why do you feel like we can only set the room up this way? Yeah. Oh, is there something that's troubling this, or why would that be an issue? And they basically explain that like their events or clients have always done it this direction. I'm like, oh, well, we're not doing that. We're coming in from a different door. So we can totally do this because I've already removed the roadblock that we never thought existed until we had the conversation around it. And so continuing sort of asking like, oh, I need, for me, it always comes through whenever someone's like, you can't do this. And I was like, oh, can you like teach me why, or like show me how this part works and help me like better understand like what are the dilemmas in your process or my process, or what information don't you have? Because a lot of that's fixable. And so to me, if it's fixable or actionable, like let's do something about it and not just accepting it as like a no answer. And I think that translates to a great story is an example of this is I had a conversation with a caterer and I just poked around being like, why are we doing this in the inquiry process? Like, I'd like to like have a conversation around menu and not just like you think of things out of the blue. And we had a deeper conversation around if we ask these questions earlier, and if Samantha asks her clients this, then we'll know all this information earlier and we can cut out this step. Or if we need to, we can jump on a menu call and really do a menu development that feels really reflective of their story. And it just helped really sort of align both of our processes when we were both able to ask, why do you do it this way? Or why are you doing it a different way? And uncovering that about each other.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a simple question, but it can lead to so much.
Yeah. And it's super helpful if you're an introvert and you're not naturally extroverted. You can ask someone something and 7 degrees of bacon, you can just ask people why on all sorts of things. Oh, why did you name your business that way? Why was that a name that resonated with you? Why did you, like people like to talk. And so this is evidence, right? And so asking them questions for them to talk and speak is something that's truthfully, you'll learn a lot more by the active listening component of it, by just sort of staying curious and asking why.
Yeah, definitely. I think that our industry, probably all industries, could do a better job of being curious and asking why. And even like in a networking scenario, I just kind of, you see the same thing or like the same questions come up over and over again. And they're great, like, why did you start your business or how did you get started? But I feel like there's so many other questions we could be asking too that would like allow us to kind of get to know that person and their business better. Not that there's like wrong questions to ask, but I don't know. There's just the idea of being curious and like really wanting to get to know that person on a deeper level rather than just like, how long have you been planning weddings,
Right. Well, and I think to your point, I always look at it from sort of like the reverse engineering standpoint. So if what you're really truly trying to understand about somebody is who they are or what they do, then think about questions that get you to your answer, right? Like don't go into a networking event and just say, how many weddings do you have on the books? Because it sounds more like you're trying to understand where your pecking order is in the industry and not necessarily trying to understand if you can provide them value, right? Or where are you? Or have you heard from this venue? Go at it from the standpoint of what am I really looking to try and build about my relationship with this individual, or what am I trying to portray about my image within the industry, and asking questions that align with that help people do both of that, help understand where you are and position you in a certain way, but also allow you to find how you can provide value to someone else, which can lead to better creative partnerships.
Yeah. Well, that segues perfectly into our next question, which has to do with working with our creative partners and vendors. I wanted to ask you what shifts when wedding pros approach other vendors as true partners versus like just somebody that I'm working with on a wedding day. Like when we look at them as true collaborative partners, what changes?
I think in the simplest sense, everything changes. I think your sense of community changes. I think your sense of understanding your market changes. I think your sense of camaraderie and as a business, like community, not feeling like you're lonely, I think is something that is really, really important. I think on an individual level, you can begin to understand how you, the individual, your business, and your clients start to overlap to finding and mapping out new creative partners, because so often there's really that like central intersection of like me as Samantha, me as House of Joy, and the House of Joy clients. They do overlap, they do inform each other, but they're not one in the same. I am not my client. I'm similar to my client, but a little bit different in my client in different ways in terms of where we vacation and things like that. But it's helpful because as you go through meeting different creative partners, you can go through and say, okay, you're great for my corporate clients. You're great for my social clients. Or, hey, I love you as a person and I want to be your industry friend, but we don't share the same client base. So it's going to be very hard for me to align you with my client base and refer you. That doesn't mean I don't like you. That doesn't mean we can't have a relationship, but let's be business friends. Like, let's talk about new ideas and let's try to let me introduce you to other planners, or let me introduce you to other people who I think would be a better alignment for you, and create sort of a community and network that can grow together. I think you gain a lot of clarity, which informs a lot of the movements that you take in almost every aspect of your business.
Yeah, I love everything you just said. The last part about, that conversation being had about like, I don't know that we're serving the same clientele, but I would still love to be friends with you. And like,
yeah,
I'd still love to connect with you and all of that. I feel like that's a conversation that isn't had enough, because it's like, if you meet someone and you want to start building that relationship, but then they're not sending business your way, or like, I don't know. Right. I just feel like there's like this unspoken thing. And then it's like, well, why don't you want to work with me? And that conversation just isn't had very much. Yeah, and so I love that. I love the idea of just being honest and being like, I really like you. And I think you're great and your work is awesome. Like, we just have different clients and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think we can say that out loud to people. And I think we also as individuals can like do a little bit of the math next to something, being like, oh, they're pushing Colorado and I want to be in Vermont. Like, okay, we might not align. Like, I don't need to just spray and play that, pray that that it all works out. Like, especially, I'm sure you've heard, I hear it more often than I should, is just, I don't ever get any business from this person and I don't know why. And it's like, okay, well, have you like had a conversation? Like, right. At my old corporate job in manufacturing, like our sales team would always have to go in and write like a summary of understanding and be like, let's just do a checkup on the account. Like, just because they didn't give you it after the first time you talked to them, like that may just mean that your relationship isn't there, or they don't feel comfortable, or they don't know enough about you, or, that the relationships aren't just a first connection point. It's like dating with other vendors, and you've got to get to know them, get to know enough about it. And like, I want to be in the trenches with people who are, I want to be in a tent with no walls with people who want to be a team player, who are going to put down their gear and help me lift up the linens when they're soaking in water. I like to find those people, and I like to figure out who they are and what that looks like. And I like to work with people who are truly collaborative, not siloed and like, oh, this is me, I come do my thing and I leave, but who want to do the right thing, who truly want to sort of serve and that service minded. And I'm not saying anybody has to be like me, but when I find those, they're in alignment with me, with House of Joy, and often with my clients. And so I think that can be helpful to have the honesty and the conversation, like you mentioned, but also do the due diligence for ourselves to just say like, am I hitting all the marks? Or like, maybe we're just like good people together and we won't work together.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well said. So for a wedding pro who might be newer to the industry, who wants to build their network and get connected, what advice would you give to that person who maybe they're like attending a networking event coming up? How can they take those interactions of people that they might meet and build that into something more longer term?
Yeah. I think I think there's a couple of things you can do. I'd say first, show up, I think is important, that you are even showing up. I would say listen and sort of read the room and see what the room looks like, how it's taking shape, how the people are moving, how they're interacting in it, and sort of just observe how all of that's, unfolding, what people are with each other, how are they supporting each other or not within that. And then I would try to just find places to add value. It could just be that they've invited everybody to go to dinner and you're attentive and going to dinner. It could be that, something fell and they need a hand, or maybe it's that you can't hear in the back of the room and you just like need the microphone a little bit louder and speaking up and doing that because then your experience and everybody else's experience is a little bit better. But I think as you listen and observe the room and have those interactions and those different conversations, you can really start to like understand where you can provide value and where you can begin to differentiate yourself so that you stand out amongst everybody else.
Yeah, that's so huge. Like showing up and not just thinking, what can I get out of this? What can I, who can I meet that's going to benefit me? But actually having the mindset of like, how can I help, the other people here? How can I collaborate with them to help them out? I think that's like the best mindset to go in with.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we're getting close to the end. I just have a couple more questions as we're kind of wrapping up here. So I was hoping you could leave us with one piece of advice or one small change that a wedding pro could make today or tomorrow to improve their communication with either their clients or other vendors.
I think the one I always go back to time and time again is for every time you ask someone about something else, like take 2 more actions to dig deeper. Don't just leave it as a first interaction. Go back and try and find more ways to dig into the conversation, to bring it back up and really dig in. The trust is truly built on vulnerability. And when you can uncover stuff, you're showing a sense of yourself that you are actively listening and showing that like you can be trusted with information, which allows and gives signals to other people that they can trust you with vulnerable things. And vulnerability doesn't have to mean your deepest, darkest secret. It could just be any part of their personal life or any part of their personal opinion. And when you really can sort of dig a little deeper to anything, you build a lot of trust with them through the sense of protected communication of the vulnerability that they're going through. And I think that that's really a great way to build connection in the industry, to build a network, because then you can ask after you've given a bunch of times and provided value. And I think it's something that you can go through time and time again with anybody that you interact with in or even outside the industry too.
Yeah, that's great advice. I completely agree about vulnerability and the importance of it And I understand that it's scary to be vulnerable, but I think it's like one of the biggest things that you have to kind of just get over if you want to build genuine relationships. Yeah, I just pictured this scenario that happened a few months ago at a networking event. And there was a planner friend that I hadn't seen in a while. And there was kind of a group of us that like went up to her when she came in, and we were like so excited to see her. And we're like, how are you? And she said, she was like, I'm okay. Do you want like the honest answer or just like the networking version answer? And we were like, we want the real, like, we want to know what's going on with you. And so she like opened up and shared what was going on, which I appreciated so much. And I think so often we put up this facade, whether it's on social media, online, or it's in person. We kind of just show up and we're like, yeah, everything's great. Everything's fine. When a lot of us are like really struggling, whether it's personal things going on in our lives, like we all have stuff going on, or it's like business stuff. It's like, oh, business is slower. And until we open up and like share that, then we realize, oh, like it's not just me. All these other people are dealing with similar things. And it's so good. So I just, all of that just to say that I agree with you. And vulnerability is just so important, but so not utilized enough.
It reminds me of when people ask you how many weddings you have. And I'm like, what do you really want to know? Like, because what I charge and what you charge and what I do and you do are very different things. Like, what I really want to know are like, are you meeting the needs? Like, are you meeting the goals and the needs that you need to stay afloat? Like, are you, profitable to where you can pay yourself an actual income? Like, if you're not, then like, let's have a conversation. But I'm fine. And I will be. Right. So it's like, I think that's a better conversation, not how many do you have? Because you could have just as many as I have, but you're doing them for free, or you're doing from half the rate, or you could have twice as much overhead, or you just moved, or maybe your grandparents came to live with you. And we all have, there's so much more behind each of what we have going on, our sort of like professional facade, right? Like the storefront, like there's always a back of house, and the back of house can be messy or it can be tailored, but you never know unless somebody opens the door and lets you know what the back of house looks like. And you have to create trust in order to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that question, it's not like the telling question that people think it is. Like, it's not really, I think we can retire that question. There's so many other things that we could be asking. Oh, okay. Well, this has been so great. I would love if you could share where listeners can find you online and connect with you more.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me over at houseofjoy.co for our planning and design firm. You can find me personally. And if you want our newsletter and our favorite things, email at house.ofsamantha. And then you can find Kinetic Experiences at Kinetic Experiences. Kinetic also does a networking newsletter every month. And it's a great way to kind of get tips and great go-to, I call them fire starter questions, great ways to sort of start a really fun conversation, really kind of group in the connectivity and the networking side of what you do in being in different spaces. So both of those you can be part of.
Awesome. The Kinetic newsletter sounds right up my alley. So I think I'm going to have to go sign up for that. That sounds
it's
great.
Fun. It's fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Samantha. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Becky. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Event Crushed podcast. I hope you found value in this episode, and if you did, please consider sharing it with a wedding industry friend. We also hope you'll consider leaving a rating or review for the show to help other listeners find it. This podcast is edited and produced by Ace Sound Design. If you're looking to elevate your audio experience, their info can be found in the show description. As always, thank you for listening, and please connect with us on Instagram if you haven't already. Now get out there and crush it.